Right, hello everyone. Hopefully that's all warmed you up for the panel, and as Sam said, we've got some great speakers, and once they've sat down I'll introduce them. And yeah, if you sit in the order you're on there, that would be perfect, I guess. I'll apologise for people in this corner who can't see anyone, but okay, so let's start with Sarah here. Sarah Kenny, she's the managing partner for data and data and analytics at Wavemaker North, which of course, as we know, is the Group M agency. We've got Martyn Bentley, commercial director for UK at AudienceProject. So they're one of these research and measurement companies that everybody loves at the moment. They have their own panels and they look after a lot of digital consumption. We're also joined by Jo Lyall. She's the CEO for the UK at Brainlabs, which is a digital marketing agency, and so obviously focused quite a lot on performance. We've got Egan, who's the Measurement and Insight Associate Director at Finecast, and as I'm sure you all know, Finecast enables kind of cross-screen planning and buying of addressable TV. And then at the far end, we've got Ross Sargent, who is Head of Media for Asahi, Europe and International, and that's obviously the beer and cider brand, probably better known for Peroni, Grolsch, London Pride, and some nice things like that. So welcome everyone. So Ross, let's start with you, because you told me that probably half of what we spend, maybe that you spend, is non-measured. And also that you still have difficulty understanding what you sell thanks to media. I mean, they sound like, you know, quite difficult kind of issues to have even at this stage after, you know, so long of a media industry. I mean, just talk us through what your issues are and what you would like to see change.
Yeah, thank you. So if I look at this country, just this country alone, where we have a fairly complex media plan, usually, similar to Australia, I suppose, and Canada. Half of the stuff on that thing we can measure. So, you know, if we did TV, traditional television, it's very well measured. If we did some digital TV, very well measured. If we did some digital video, it's very well measured. But that's less than half of what we do. You will come in contact with our brands through various things, various touch points. So things that you interact in a bar, in a club, in a restaurant, in a pub, in a off sales, in a Waitrose, or possibly an Aldi with current times, and you get the schedule, which is really rich and it's beautiful, but only half of it's measurable. And I think we're suffering from a frustration of many years of having a TV-dominated conversation and a TV-dominated research. So my biggest frustration is hearing the amount of GRPs that we're playing in the media schedule. Like, well, so what's that mean? That's like 1/5 of what we do. And what we're really missing is we're missing the holistic measurement. But that in itself is only half of the problem. What we don't understand and what's not very clear is how that follows through single source all the way to the end. And we've got these big gaps which leave us that we can sort of approximate what your reach is and maybe what your frequency is, and there's this massive gap and we don't really know how that relates to the actual sales. Obviously, if it's an e-commerce discussion, then we can do that perfectly well from start to end, potentially perfectly well, depending on how well you attribute it, but that's kind of lost. So there's some big gaps.
All right, well, we'll come back to some of this sort of outcomes in a little while. So Martyn, so you provide the missing part of total TV measurement. So just talk us through what you do at AudienceProject and, you know, what your core value add is in terms of measurement.
Sure. So I think the value add is really that everyone knows there's gaps in what is measurable. What was it? 75% of media investment in the UK is in digital. So there's huge gaps where the money's chasing the audience, and in digital there aren't necessarily currencies for nearly all of it. So that's the value add, is we can provide data to help marketers understand what the reach, frequency and audience composition is in digital channels. It can then also be fused together with the linear TV data if it's equivalent in quality. So that's kind of what we do. And I think to what Ross is saying, and I think this is going to come up later on, measuring reach is one thing, but certainly in digital has always sort of sold the idea that everything is, you can tell more about digital in terms of effect, mainly because of cookies. And obviously we're in a world where the cookies are sort of going away eventually when Google sort of pulls the plug. But cookies were never great for counting true effect anyway, or reach to that matter. So what we see as a measurement business that's primarily concerned with reach and frequency is that's interesting, it's really useful, it's a hygiene metric, but we want to know whether it worked as well. Like you're saying, Ross, there's that gap as well, in effect. But yeah, that's where we sit in it.
All right. Now we are going to take some audience questions at the end, but if anything is really pressing, you want to put your hand up straight away, do. But before that, Joe, I mean, you said that one of the big trends you've seen is the sort of coming together of fast and slow data, so that you know the value of marketing. Can you talk us through what you mean?
Yeah, sure. So as a kind of performance-orientated agency, we've always been very focused on what happens at the bottom line and driving absolute performance for a brand, whether it's sales or some kind of action. But increasingly, as the brands that we work with are moving up the funnel and spending more of their marketing spend on online in general, it becomes much less straightforward, I think, to the point that was just made. Like some of the metrics that are used in digital don't really tell you what actually has happened, what's the real value on my business. So we're starting to combine some of that slower moving data like econometrics to really understand what happens over time, but not models that you run once a year and then use that data for the next 12 months and assume that the world's still the same, because it probably won't be, but ongoing models that allow you to see continuously how is my marketing spend having an overall effect on my activity. And it can give you that opportunity to start to actually place more value on channels like social, for example, which won't always perform as well for you in the marketing mix as say search, but you really are overlooking the fact that it does drive consideration, brand awareness, that has that kind of trickle-down effect on all of your other metrics in the business. So wherever possible, we try and combine those two data sets together, and we bring a lot of test and learn to that as well. So really trying to find out in the short term, if I do this, what will happen? Bringing hypotheses and that kind of scientific approach to marketing to help kind of close that gap of understanding that does exist for so many brands, unless you really are a kind of pure D2C and just very interested in, I spend money today and I get a result tomorrow. But majority of brands want to understand something, I think, a little bit more complex.
And that's the majority of your clients who are, a lot of them are performance focused as well.
Increasingly changing actually, but from a heritage perspective, yes, Brainlabs was kind of built on driving results for our clients. But as our kind of client base gets bigger, we're working with much bigger clients who have much bigger budgets, and they do want to spend up the funnel rather than just at the bottom collecting all of the most valuable customers.
Okay, and Sarah, I know obviously you're very focused on business outcomes, everybody is, but I mean, longer term objectives, how do you deal with that? How do you?
So I think, and very similar to what Joe's talking about, making sure that our clients are really comfortable with the fact that we need to use multiple forms of measurement together to give us a holistic picture of what's going on. I guess similar to what Joe's talked about, we have a framework to help our clients then organise those different types of fast and slow moving data sources, and increasingly trying to spend a lot more time looking at the KPI framework that the analytics needs to work up to. So, spending a lot of time with our clients debating, what is the North Star outcome, what are the other outcomes that then ladder back up to that, so that the plan is always pointing to a business outcome that goes across multiple parts of a marketing team inside a client business. So, and again, combining traditional techniques like market mix modelling, but with the added power of increased computing, which means we can run them more frequently alongside kind of more granular diagnostics.
And this focus on sort of econometrics and outcome type modelling, has this increased because of what's happened with digital, the loss of sort of identity and sort of insights onto intent and behaviour, that kind of thing? Or
I think certainly across our client base, which is fairly wide spectrum of organisations, I mean, econometrics and MMM has been a go-to staple for FMCG and CPG brands for a long time. I think with the loss of the cookie and things, there has been a sort of reinvigoration, or it's kind of come back as one of those things. And also other organisations, even those potentially who have that kind of direct relationship with the end consumer, still see now the benefit of looking at that holistic cross-channel macro view of what the plans are doing, driving to an outcome. You know, we also apply the same techniques to looking at long-term brand health drivers, so that it's both long-term from, you know, brand building perspective as well as sales and commercial outcomes.
Okay. And Jack, I mean, we heard earlier about the sort of drive towards cross-media. I mean, the sort of shorter-term goal, I suppose, is cross-platform. You're very involved in, you know, cross-platform planning. So in terms of where we are with broadcast linear TV plus other things like BVOD or AVOD, I mean, just talk us through where we are in terms of, you know, unified planning right now and what you contribute to that.
Yeah, thanks, John. And excuse the wedding-style microphone I've got. I'm not, obviously not as important as the other panellists. But no, I think, so we actually work quite closely with both Sarah at Wavemaker and Martyn. And a lot of the questions we get from clients are around how is my kind of overall AV budget going to work? Is it going to be a combination of linear TV and addressable TV? So at Finecast, we work to try and build out an optimum plan, working with the agencies to really kind of enhance the reach that you can get from those sorts of campaigns. So I think what we've seen in the past with clients is they really want to understand the incremental value of adding in addressable TV to a linear buy. So we actually work with Martyn and AudienceProject to try and understand the incremental value of that reach. So we have a product called Total TV Measurement that allows advertisers and the agencies to essentially work out the reach that you would achieve from linear TV, the incrementality that you get from adding a BVOD or a Finecast buy on top of that, and we can work with the agencies as well to understand the incremental kind of cost savings and efficiencies that come with that as well. So it can be quite powerful. I think it's something that's just going to continue. I think as new players come into the market, I mean, we heard from the likes of Roku earlier in one of the sessions that I was in, and as more of those players come in, it's just going to be more and more important for clients, I think, to understand that full picture of the spend that you're putting into AV, but also across different channels as well.
Okay, I suppose this is the moment where we should mention Netflix, because they would be part of this Total TV buy. So, I mean, anybody, just jump in. What do you think about Netflix, their measurement, their offer? Who wants to go first? Martyn, you're looking at me.
Well, I can say loads of stuff about that. I think the buyer reaction is really what I'd like to hear about. So they've probably been in and pitched to some of you.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, so I think the Netflix opportunity is really exciting because it's not the first. Hulu has solved the whole issue. Disney Plus knows exactly what they're doing. Maybe here the discussion is, wow, okay, this is new. But it was a really interesting thing over the last couple of weeks of I don't know if any of our friends are here in the room, but interesting, fairly arrogant introduction to the market. So we're going to sell it at $60 cost per thousand, and we're not going to tell you anything about it. Not nearly as much as you tell us about it, although you don't tell us everything there. I think it's a good thing to have, and it's a good thing to shake up because it makes us all question ourselves.
Okay, anyone else want to add anything?
I think it's kind of disappointingly basic in terms of what they're offering. If you think about the richness of the data they have actually about their viewers, their subscribers, they're not actually offering that to the market at the moment, and there obviously are there are reasons for that. I think there's probably also a danger of a US lens on it, and what's possible in the US is probably not going to be possible here in the same way because of our GDPR regulations, etc. But it does feel a bit like a kind of one-size-fits-all. We're a premium TV platform. If you want us, this is the price for it. And ultimately, the results will, I guess, tell whether or not people are going to carry on spending money. I think it's worth testing, but you've got to be prepared to test at probably quite a high price. But you can test at a small volume as well. So why would you not test? It's a major platform for majority of audiences. I'm sure if we looked in this room and said, where do you watch most of your TV? I'm fairly sure Netflix is going to come up quite high for most of us. You've kind of got to use that judgment to it, I think, as well.
Okay, so Sarah, they've signed up to Barb now, so does that make a difference?
So that came out this morning, I think. And I think that, the cost per thousand question aside and the lack of data transparency, you know, hopefully will change as they kind of get used to the market, because the UK is very different from a sort of broadcast VOD perspective. But the fact that they have signalled that they're signing up to Barb, I think, is good news from signalling to other sort of tech platforms in this space. You know, outside of Origin, there's always been quite a divide between the kind of traditional or the big tech vendors and then sort of television broadcasting. So, you know, Netflix kind of stepping in some respects, bridging that, I think is good news from attempting to get to, you know, on the path to trying to get some level of cross-screen currency. So from that perspective, yes, the £69.
From a Finecast perspective as well, it's quite exciting because we're an integrator and we kind of try and provide a single point of access to all of that AV inventory. So having a player like Netflix come in and start to be a bit more engaging with other sort of bodies like Barb and things like that, I think is quite a positive sign for the future.
Okay, has anyone got a question, not on Netflix, but just about measurement, other measurement right now? Because we could take that now very quickly if you want. Otherwise, we'll just continue. Yeah. Okay, gentleman over there at the back.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's Nigel Ashton from Amplified Intelligence. We're an attention measurement business with our supporting Andy on the Attention Council. There's a lot of talk on the panel here also this morning around it's never been a better time to be a planner. It's never been a more challenging time to be a planner. Lots about holistic versus vertical planning, comparability of platforms. Just love to get your opinion on the willingness to adapt to planning in a different way, because the signals that you get from things like attention and other signals that these companies here provide perhaps require a different way of looking at media, particularly when you're looking at more outcome-based solutions. So I'd just love to get a sense of a willingness to be able to an understanding of how to adapt, because generally that's what's required.
Do you want to ask that to anyone in particular, or should I just choose somebody?
Anyone? Yeah.
Okay, who wants to answer that? Attention and how you deal with it.
Let me start quickly. I think it's a very, very exciting space. We're doing 3 really big attention tests in Australia. And I think what's really so we just spoke about the one provider which is charging a hell of a high CPM for something which ostensibly they're saying it's going to get better attention and better value. And that's what we do with our beers. We sell you fantastic beers that are better than anything else for a significantly higher price, because it is a really, really good beer. So why not should a media owner say, listen, I'm selling you something that's going to provide you higher attention? So we're definitely keen on attention. We don't know how to measure it. We know there's some brilliant people who do, and we'd love to work more with them. What is really interesting about attention, though, is that little piece that low attention isn't that much worse than high attention. And that, I think, is really exciting, because if we suddenly discover that low attention is pretty okay, then everybody selling high attention will be like, well, cheers.
Okay, so what happens in that scenario? If you can get twice as much media with half the attention, would you do that then?
If you can get twice as much media with half the attention, and half the attention is only 2/3 of the value of full attention, then that's clearly a better chance.
Okay. So on attention, and also the alternative measurement solutions like Martyn's company are putting together, and we're hearing about people being offered choices of currencies now. You know, you can choose to have incremental reach as a currency. I mean, how do we cope with that as an industry? I mean, Martyn, you start off. I mean, can we cope with multiple measurement solutions and multiple currencies?
Well, I'm kind of glad I'm not a marketer because or an agency person, because there's just so much to try and decode. It's definitely a nightmare in terms of just reach, you know, sales data and all the rest of the other stuff you've got to try and decode. We don't set out to be a currency, we're just trying to solve a problem, which is a gap in data. And we're really a market research company at heart, so that is generally about working with incomplete data sets. But I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. I mean, like the Project Origin thing, which was briefly touched on, and Whitaker and Brown talked about it. Sorry, I should have said their surnames, but you know what I mean. It was a great paper. Is it ever? It's not going to. It just can't possibly be one number or one truth. It's just a real pain in the arse. But in the US, I think there's something like 70 companies all vying to become that now. So I don't know how you deal with that. So to try and sort of make sense out of it, I think when we work with, particularly with the brands that we work with, they tend to be large TV advertisers. They know why they want to use this kind of bit of data that we can provide, because they want to understand the incrementality. And then I really wanted to add something about attention, because what we're seeing, we're not an attention company, but then we're seeing the kind of quite the forward-thinking marketers or media directors, particularly we work with, getting spreadsheets out. You can't get away from that, but they're layering up new sets of data. They bring the attention data, the sort of reach data for stuff that's not covered by Bob, and they're making their own decisions on the value of that impression and what should be paid for it. And it's really interesting. So I think it's kind of in a situation where people are going to work it out for themselves, as long as the right data is there that fills the gaps.
I mean, Sarah, do you think attention could be a currency, or is it just another proxy that tells us that there's quality media out there?
So I think, so for the first thing, I don't think all attention is the same. A bit like not all impacts are the same. And equally, we need to understand a bit more about, so Ross talked about half the attention, and, because as human beings, we process information in different ways. We're not always actively in market, but still absorbing sort of advertising and signals from brands as we go about our daily lives. So, there's a real difference between kind of passive and active attention, and, moving towards, how do we understand how those two things work together to then drive sort of engagement and then ultimately a relationship between the consumer and the brand. So I think we're a ways off understanding that link between attention and the different types of attention and kind of business outcomes for brands. Test and learn is a very good place to start, and certainly I think attention is a good additional kind of media metric. I don't think it's going to become the one thing, because human beings and how you define attention and what is good attention versus bad is ultimately going to be, I would say, probably impossible. So, but how we sort of learn over time, incorporate it into the portfolio of metrics that we've got, I certainly think it's a step on from delivered impressions and clicks, certainly. So
and Jack, Finecast did a big study with Amplified Intelligence on this, comparing different media and attention. So just tell us the top level insights that you got out of that.
Yeah, it was a really interesting bit of research that we did with Amplified Intelligence. And we wanted to get an understanding of how attention really worked in the kind of BVOD versus linear TV space. We actually saw that the kind of platform, the media platform that you're running activity on, is a really big driver of the level of attention you're going to get. I think it all goes back to that point of not all reach is equal. And I think attention can act as a really useful kind of quality metric to really help brands and advertisers just understand exactly, I guess, what kind of attention elasticity is what we called it in the report that you're operating within, because certain channels have different levels of elasticity. So TV, for example, has quite a broad range, whereas some of the other channels has a bit of a lower range. So understanding that helps you plan out your media and your spend up front a little bit more efficiently. So it was a really interesting bit of research. I think at the moment, I mean, even within some of the companies that measure attention, that we're doing it in different ways at the moment. So I think some standardization could help just make that metric as impactful as possible.
Okay, last word on attention, Joe. Just give us your sort of attitude to that.
So I think we've already proven that everyone's happy to pay different prices for advertising, because that is how Google and Facebook works. You pay the price that you're prepared to pay for your brand. So needing a kind of singular currency that allows you to directly compare what one advertiser's paid to another, I don't think is as important as everyone thinks it is. And for as long as I've worked in this industry, I feel like there's always been this debate about, can we have consistency in reach and being able to compare every channel and every media owner in the same way? And what happens is you get to this kind of lowest common denominator approach, which actually doesn't really serve anyone and doesn't really help you to do a better job. And I worry a bit that attention is another one of those. Or let's put that in, because we know that people that interact with something essentially watch it, like it, share it, leave a comment, don't like it, because that can also be attention, right? And negative attention is a good thing. And of course it probably is, because advertising is just about getting noticed. and changing what somebody thinks about you, but it's not a one hit. You don't just put the ad out or put a piece of social content up and that's it. They go and buy the product sometimes, but invariably not. So I don't think it's the solution. I think it's important because it helps you kind of make an assessment of where am I most likely to get my audience engaging with my brand, where am I most likely to spend my money in the right way. And the need to talk about reach doesn't come up very often for me these days.
Okay, right, we'll move on to cross-media measurement now. And when I asked you all about origin, I'll give you sort of 3 of the answers I got, and then it was single currency would help, noble ambition, we support WFA principles, but mountain to climb, long road ahead, will be a long time coming. It kind of sort of summarises what most people say publicly. I mean, obviously some people don't think it'll work at all, but so Ross, I mean, what does origin give to you? How badly do you need it? And do we need to go further? Because that doesn't include yet, I don't believe, out of home and some other measurements. So, I mean, do we need to expand it? I mean, in the Netherlands, they've got, well, they're trying, NMO are trying to bring in out of home print, radio into a completely cross-media system.
So, great step, absolutely. I think the more we can measure, the better. I'm totally in agreement that we as marketers need to be more comfortable with lots of different pieces of information and be comfortable to tie those together. We can't just have a bullet point saying this works, that doesn't work, this is the final number. And very often, you know, you'll see a total reach number and you know it's crap because it's obviously calculated by the Sainsbury's formula or something. So it's great. It's really, really good. But I think the thing that's really bugging everybody, and I know it bugs the agencies, but it also bugs everybody, is that the research comes with a huge amount of bias from whoever gives it. Mm-hmm. So let me be frank, when a media agency that basically sells group TV purchase deals to their clients tells you that this is the research and they've left out all the wonderful stuff that you do, we say, okay, cool, take a pinch of salt. When you come along, you show us all the fantastic CPAs and the CPA, you know, the real touch stuff, and you go, yeah, but you're not really doing the TV deal, so you're not worried about the reach thing. I think we have to take everything with a pinch of salt, and that one's going to be taken with a huge pinch of salt because they've got a lot of money for salt.
Okay, Sarah, I mean,
I think I kind of talked about this at the beginning. I think for that kind of macro channel, how do you understand the kind of the impact and contribution of offline and online together, you know, sort of fall back on things like econometrics, albeit not once a year. But they've proven over the longevity of the fact that they've remained in market to be accurate in helping to identify the contribution of not only the media, but, you know, all of those other things that, like sales promotions and things in nightclubs and bars. So, you know, at a macro cross-channel level, the more we can add colour and depth to that data from things like panel-based information, then I think the more robust that kind of macro level measurement gets. But this kind of utopian world that we will be able to join everything together, I think, is increasingly difficult with some of the things that Ipsos Iris talked about, you know, privacy, the fragmented purchase journeys that we have as consumers, the multiple devices that we use. So I think, you know, getting comfortable with that kind of modelled world, I think, is something that is going to grow over time, and the use of panels, and then how you extrapolate that.
okay, any questions at this point? We will come back for more, have other opportunities.
So I was really struck by one of Ross's early observations that Matthew did, your observation that half your activity is not measurable. And it makes me reflect back to when I was a CMO, we had lots of econometrics and MMM models. And I had 2 fears around it. One is they loved a short-term action, a short-term spike of sales, whatever. So you tended to over-reward short-term activity. And my CFO would love it, my media auditor would love it, but in the long run, the brand building delivered more. So I'm curious how you cope with that in this world. As we get into the more specific of measurement that's on the slide, there's a lot of conversation about how we measure audience and unique audience and even attention, but how we turn that into action. Which kind of relates to the first question, really, because I think it's quite easy to know how you're buying audience and attention. It's much harder to know how that's turning into challenge given only half gets measurable, but I worry that we are then over-rewarding the channels in which there's an excess of data, precise data, and under-rewarding those that often have a bigger return but are harder to measure.
Okay.
So I'd love to answer that. So firstly, I studied econometrics university. I didn't really ever do it. So I always watched it with great fun. And I remember ceteris paribus. Everything else remains the same. So assuming nothing changes in this big changing world, this little thing will have this little effect. So very, very dangerous. The second thing is most econometrics is modeled, as you say, on sales. Which is it this month's sales, last month's sales, next week's sales, a month time sales, 3 month sales? What is it? Because is it what I'm doing now supposed to affect, I promise you, we do not advertise today to affect today's sales. We're hoping to advertise to you to get to you at some point at a later point. And the big debate is it tomorrow, next week, or next month, or next year? So there's 3 broad areas which I think are really, really important. The number one is what we might call advertising. So the advertising which gently, Ehrenberg Bass, nudges you before you might go into the category, so before you might pop down to the pub, and then gently reminds you afterwards that that Japanese beer that you had was called Asahi Super Dry. It's a lovely beer, by the way. And you'll remember that that was the beer and that does the job. The second thing, which is the stuff that's not researchable very well, is we sponsor the British, every company does it, so we sponsor the British Summertime Festival. We sponsor Untold in Romania. We sponsor Gay Pride in Australia, which I'm very proud of. And there, what are we trying to do? We're trying to get you to come into our world for maybe 10 minutes to experience our brand. We also do the same thing with influencers to get them to bring you into their world and talk about our world for 10 minutes. That stuff's really, really hard to do. And I would say any normal consumer goods company like ours would be spending around about a third of that on the advertising piece, a third of that on that middle piece, which we just don't study at all. And then between us and our customers would be a third on the stuff that you can really track, so sales driving things, please buy this immediately, which for us could be a tent card in a bar saying buy this right now. It could be an Ocado ad, or it could be, you know, something online. So there's that really, really important big middle bit. And the thing is, we all know, you know that if you're going to buy a Range Rover, that you should experience it. And there's a cost to that, and we'd be very happy to spend a lot of money on marketing on that, but we just don't measure it. So you've got to say, well, how much? And now we're faced with this really scary year in this country where we're told that TV, through this interesting buying mechanism, is going to increase by 15, maybe 20%. So clearly we're going to move all of that money out and do it in some other things. And and the question becomes, you know, do we do more festivals? Do we do more experiences? Are we and therefore are we reaching more people through the festival, or are we getting to spend more time with people in the festival? It's exciting.
Okay.
Big clear answer, but that's the challenges. Yeah.
Okay, Jack, tell me one thing that you would like in TV measurement next year, or within the next year, that's actionable, that's realistic, that would help you.
I think for us at Finecast, when we're trying to measure the impact of campaigns, because we are just one part of an overarching media plan, when I speak to clients, it's really important to try and go back to the objective as much as possible of the campaign. If we don't do that, then it's really hard for us to actually uncover, you know, the impact that the spend has had. So I think my kind of measurement Christmas present would be a bit of time up front to really interrogate the brief and build in a measurement plan that is suitable and fits purpose. Because sometimes, you know, that's not always possible with just tight deadlines and things like that. But I think the focus on effectiveness and effectively kind of reaching your customer base is only going to get more and more prevalent next year. So having that time up front to actually make space for it, I think would be really important.
Okay, Martyn, same question to you. One thing that's actionable, realistic for next year.
Measurement Christmas present. I think it would be the BVOD allowing itself to be measured with more than just linear TV, because that is good for them. I think I completely agree with what I can't remember their first names, Whittaker and Brown said, but it would help, I think, solve quite a lot of the problems that we can do panels for the next 5 years about. If there was more of an origin style solution to a closer, a holistic GRP across the things that are definitely comparable. Let's forget about outdoor and radio; they're just very different. That would really help solve a lot of these problems, because then people, or the marketers, would know at least what the kind of 1+ cover is in most of the kind of AV media they're going to buy, and that's a big missing feature, because we can get quite a long way of the way to that number, but we still don't see the BVOD And that's where I think, there needs to be that clearer view of everything together.
Okay, I'm going to ask the same question to everyone else in a minute, but do we have any audience questions before that? Okay, well, so lady at the back was first, I think, and then we'll come to you next.
Hiya, it's Anne Sampson, I'm a media time columnist, and I've just been really interested to hear all of your debates about the plethora of data sources that we're now able to use, and that's great from anyone who works in research and insights and background. But what do your businesses do when you've got contradictory information across those data sources? Because I think as data sources multiply, that's something that we potentially bump into. And the point raised earlier about obviously different bodies of research from different media owners sometimes raises that, but even when you're working with a client discreetly and you're putting together all of that information, you will encounter that, and how do you deal with that challenge?
Okay, we've only got time for one person to answer, so do you have a particular preference, or shall I just pick someone?
No, just whoever fancies.
Okay, Joe, off you go.
So I think Ross said about pinch of salt, I would definitely add that to that question, because so many of those kind of bodies of research have vested interest in what they're trying to say and the positioning that they've got. So my advice would be to have a bespoke measurement framework for your brand and work out what is important to you, and don't get distracted by the noise of joint industry currencies and things that don't actually matter if they don't make a difference to your business. If they make a difference to your business and you can prove it, then fantastic, use it. But build a framework that works for you and allows you to measure the things that matter to you and matter to your business and drive your bottom line.
Okay, and there's a question here as well.
Yeah, so my question would be, I think, having listened to all of you and reflected on the measurement that we have, I work for Vodafone, so we probably do all the things that any big brand would do, and probably a lot of that emphasis is based on unnamed, because that's the one thing which is universal. The problem, and this is probably a question, I think Sarah and Ross, be interested in your point of view, having very kind of broad remits. One of the biggest challenges is even if you have data you believe in, you don't know why. So you might get a ranking in LLM, but you don't know why in this report radio is now performing better than TV. It used to be worse, and people's getting a bit better, and social sort of waivers. But why those channels are outperforming other channels, and obviously price comes into it. But ultimately, action's only really valuable if you know what caused that medium to be disproportionately effective. And even if you know that it's more effective, you don't actually know whether it was your creative or your buying mechanism that drove that. But how do you feel measurement will change to get maybe slightly more under the skin of why consumers are reacting to certain channels, certain time lengths, more than other channels?
Okay, Sarah, you go first.
So I think sort of two parts to the answer to how certainly as an agency we approach that, and it comes from the fact that, so Joe was talking about having a framework. Absolutely, we also want our clients to all have a single measurement framework, but we organise our analytics techniques in that framework into 3 layers, and the middle one is around really getting into what's going on inside a channel. So if at a macro level, so from MMM, a particular channel is performing well, we then use what we call granular diagnostics to then unpick what that might have been. And those granular diagnostics can be anything from test and learn and control and experimentation. So, really trying to understand, is it the creative, or is it the audience, or that type of thing. And I think test and learn is a method that's been around a long time, but because of the computing power, and particularly the more addressable more channels get, we can do that a lot faster and a lot more easily. And then research as well into what's driving consumer behaviour, asking consumers, novel, about what influences their buying behaviours at different points in that sort of purchase journey and cycle. But I think we also, the way we set up the measurement frameworks, we also have a rule that different measurement tools can't contradict each other, and typically the macro measurement tends to be the guiding light, and then we look at what's important that the macro measurement has told us.
Okay, thank you. Ross, anything you need to add?
I'll be quick and I'll talk about the creative versus the media and splitting that out. And I have been in media on and off, well, mostly for 25 years. And I am afraid to say that generally speaking, the creative is generally always not that amazing. 1 in 9 campaigns are absolutely fucking brilliant. And the others are just, okay. Very often we say, well, this worked and that didn't work. And by the time we've had the conversation, we're on the 3rd campaign anyway. In a great world, we'd be having consistency behind campaigns, and at some stage, somebody in some company could actually say that where radio worked well this year and didn't work well last year because of something about radio, rather than the fact that you changed the entire campaign just because you changed the marketing director. So I think splitting those two out is really, really important. However, because of what I started off with, is that sort of 8 out of 9 campaigns, generally the creative doesn't have that much of an effect. And then more recently, not that I was biased, clearly I am, not that I was biased, but reading so much of the research from decent, like proper academics saying that, well, actually, a lot of what we do is very subliminal. There's not a lot of attention being paid in it. It's not an attention plug again, but it's very, very subliminal. It's not quite as active as, oh my God, that campaign from that retailer was amazing. Christmas is going to be different because of the 60-second ad with a lovely multicultural cast, which is great. So I think it's a lot more subliminal than that, and I think the creative matters a lot less. You can only say it in this kind of conference, really. It doesn't go down so well at Ad Week.
Right, okay, well, you're media, so that's okay. Right, so just to wrap up then, we need that 30-second answer from Sarah, Joe and Ross. We'll go down the line. In fact, Joe can go first, but so as I think Jack termed it, your Christmas present in measurement, what do you want?
Make sure the brief actually matches how you're going to measure, because there are still briefs that come through around driving awareness and consideration, and then actually the team that runs the campaign are just have to be focused on the delivery of performance and sales. So just don't have schizophrenic briefs. Be really clear about what is it that really, really, really matters, and create that measurement framework around it to make sure everyone's aligned on how you're going to measure it and how you're going to ensure that the money is spent in the best possible way.
Okay, brilliant. That was 30 seconds as well. So Sarah?
And I guess in line with that, spend more time thinking about the metrics. So, and debate them with your agencies, inside your organisation, across not just marketing, but other stakeholders like finance, so that there's real consensus around what success looks like. And it's harder than it sounds, and then make sure that you stay true to that in terms of the briefs and the activity that you then put out into the world.
Thank you. Okay, Ross, finish us off.
30 seconds. So it's a really, really tough year, and we might be having some consolidations and buyouts. Facebook's worth less than half of it was in the beginning of the year. Meta, S4 Capital, and I'm a shareholder in a very small way, is worth about 20% of what it was worth very recently. What would be really, really awesome is if these companies would start investing in each other, because we have a forgive me, traditional old world ad agencies and TV and radio versus a whole bunch of other people. And if they were slightly more integrated via purchases and mergers, then we might start to solve a bit of that.
Lovely. Okay, great stuff. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this panel. Big thank you for our panellists.